I'm going to be going over how to use the plastic tool in Tahoma to do some mesh deforming, which can give you some really interesting effects. So I have two levels that are set up already. I have a vector level that's been collapsed into a subscene, and I have a raster level. You can use any level type at all. I just collapsed the vector level because it makes the mesh itself more predictable. I'm just going to hide the vector level in the subscene so that I'm just looking at my raster octopus for now, and I'm going to do the plastic tool at its most basic here for you. So plastic tool is this one right here. Looks almost like a little river with arrows pointed at it. And I'm just going to create a mesh, and if we look up close you can see that the edge of the mesh protrudes, so that's the mesh margin. And I can have it as low as 2 if I want it to be particularly close to the drawing. Depending on the drawing you have and the behavior you want, you may or may not want that to be bigger or smaller. And then the mesh length is how detailed the mesh is. And whenever I'm happy with it, I can just apply it. So the mesh displays with these little green triangles. I'm in this build skeleton mode, which I'm going to come back to in just a moment. If I realize there are things that I need to change in the mesh itself, I can select on the sort of little nodes over here. I can select the edges themselves. I can delete an edge if it's not somewhere that I want. If I right click and go into the context menu, I can cut the mesh at that point. I can collapse the edge or split the edge. So different things that I can do to start making some customizations, but honestly, for the most part, you're probably not going to need this mode. Just be aware that it's there. So I'm going to go back to build skeleton, and the skeleton itself could look like all sorts of different things. I'm just going to come back over to the website for a moment, and we can see a couple of animated GIFs showing some mesh deformation. So on the left I have this little ball, and on the right I have a little caterpillar. There is some additional animation added with the Animate tool to actually do the change in position, but otherwise the mesh itself can change the pose of whatever the drawing is. So I have a couple of different setups here, and you can see some more if you look at this area of the website, which is attached to the assignment. But the first node that you place is called the root. And this is not going to be something that's movable, and so the best location varies depending on your drawing and the behavior you want to have. You'll often put it sort of in the center of mass for your drawing, or if, like, let's say I'm doing an arm and it's connected to a larger body, I might put the root where the joint is going to be connecting the two drawings together. I might even put it completely off to the side or above or below because of the behavior I'm trying to do, like I did with the caterpillar. But in this case, I'm going to go probably something about right here. And I'm just going to add additional nodes coming out from there. If I'm not happy with the location, I can click and drag to move it to a new one. I can go back to the root to start adding the nodes for the limbs. I don't always have to be coming out from the node itself. Like if I made a few of these as starting points, I can come back to any node and continue adding from there, or moving it around, or deleting it entirely if I realize that's not something that I actually need. So there can be a lot of flexibility as far as this goes. And you can even have more than one skeleton because you can actually have more than one mesh for more than one drawing. So sometimes you might make additional skeletons here and just do the same process for each skeleton that you create. But that is all that I need for this particular drawing. So now I'm going to head over into Animate, and I can start posing my drawing and getting it into whatever starting pose I want. So let's say I want this to be my starting pose, and maybe I want my animation to loop, so I want it to start and end at the same point. So I can come over to whatever frame number. I'm going to have this be a second of animation, and if I right click over here, I can set a global key so it's exactly the same as the start. And now if I come into the middle and start making changes, maybe something like this. Now, the playback didn't go quite as much as I want to, so I'm just going to add a stop frame hold over on the right here. Whenever you have glitchy playback, that is probably the problem. So now I can play through, and we can see that. If I decide actually 1 second is too short, I actually want this to be twice as long. I want it to be 48 seconds. I can just drag the keyframe when it's active in blue to whatever location I want. And now that's slowed down the movement. And while I could keep refining it, the timing is definitely a lot better. So keep in mind, after you set the initial keyframe on your first frame, if you want to end your movement in the same position, you'll just right click and do that global key. Now, if I set a global rest key, it goes back into the default location. So I'm just going to delete that one and put it back there. All right, now something else that's pretty cool is we can actually control the stacking order. So over here, you can see that the order's getting a little bit wonky where the meshes are overlapping. So I can fix that and have more control over how it's going to behave. So maybe at the start here, this particular node has a stacking order of 1. So if I change that number, now that's moving in front. Now, maybe I don't want that to be in front. Maybe at some point I want it to be behind. So maybe I'm going to take that number and set that to a -1 so that it moves behind. 0 is the default. So when it's a +1, it's going to be in front. When it's a negative, it's going to be behind. And I can change that as I need to. So maybe it's going to be in front over here, but then they're going to change the order. And this is at the node level. So if there are other nodes that are being funny, I might want to do the same thing with those as well. I'm just going to delete this one here so that I just have that single change. But like this one over here behind, I might want to put that to a -1 to make sure that that drawing definitely is behind. And so I can have complete control, and that stacking order can change over the course of the animation. Now, something else that is sometimes helpful, I'm just going to play through and maybe scrub a little bit over here. You can see that the way this is deforming in this sort of corner here is maybe not the most ideal deformation there is. Maybe I want to change that behavior. So we have this paint rigid mode, which can sort of help us control what things are going to be. When things are green, they're moving freely. I have these 2 different modes, rigid and flexible. So green is completely flexible. And red is going to make the area more rigid. Now, this might not be exactly what I want, but I'm going to go over into the animate mode. And we can see how that area is changing. Now, I might need to change more than I actually did, or maybe it's that I need to change less. When I'm back over in Paint Rigid, maybe it's just that the whole edge needs a little bit of correcting there. So I can do some experimenting to see what is going to give me a better behavior. You can see on this end, maybe it's actually not helpful, or maybe I need the entire edge. So I can play around going back and forth between what's actually flexible, what's actually rigid, and so sometimes that can give me a better behavior, a more controllable behavior as well. But that's really the very basics of the plastic tool. Just a couple more things to mention before moving on to the other level. If you want to see your animation without the mesh, one thing you can do is just turn off the mesh visibility, and then if you're off of the plastic tool, you're going to see pretty normal playback. Another option, even if the mesh is turned on, save first with Command S, but you can turn on preview to see what the particular frame looks like. You can see I didn't hide the other octopus in the preview view or the render view, so that's why that's showing. And we can also press Command R to open up this little preview window. This one is better if you want to actually do playback of the animation. You want all the red to go away so it's finished calculating. But then when you play through, it plays back pretty much in real time, which is really helpful. When you're in this preview mode, it's really okay just to sort of click through, but you probably don't want to play through. It just takes too much processing. The preview window with Command R is going to give you a better result. All right, but that's really it as far as the basics go for the plastic tool. Now I'm going to hide both the mesh and the octopus in the normal preview and the rendered mode for my first layer, and I'm going to turn on the visibility of my second layer. Now I'm going to go through the exact same process to get started, but I have 3 drawings here, and I probably should have spent a little bit more time on them. I was working on sort of a turnaround for the arms, so they start from the back view and then turn to the front view, but they definitely need like some more work for the progression, but let's pretend that they're perfect, and when I just play through or scrub through, I get a really smooth turn for the arms. Let's pretend. So I'm going to select all of my drawings just by holding down Shift and clicking from the first to the last. And now when I go to the plastic tool and create a mesh, I'm just going to apply it, it creates, oh, let's try that again. Delete that. If I click on the first, hold down on Shift, click on the last, and create mesh, now when I apply it, it's going to create meshes for all of the drawings. So I can actually have this additional animation just because of the drawings changing over the course of the animation, as well as whatever the plastic tool itself is doing. So this allows me to add just some really nice customization as I'm working. So building the skeleton is going to be pretty similar. So I'm just going to start wherever I want my root to be. And for the limbs, it depends on the behavior that I want. I might just connect straight out, something like this, for the different limbs. And sometimes I might add a little bit of a controller before I actually make the limbs itself. So the 2 on top, I'll show you that approach for. And it really does vary depending on how you want to be able to move it. And I probably should be a little bit more consistent with how many nodes I'm doing for the arms. They're probably going to be the same, but I'm just going to leave that as is. Now if I'm doing a controller, I might actually click somewhere off to the side before coming over and doing the rest of the nodes for the drawing. So perhaps something like that. Great, so now I'm ready to head over into Animate mode. And now I'm going to experiment with how things are moving around. So with the one with the control, I can play around with the various locations and angles and see what ends up working for this. Now, it may be that the placement isn't quite what I want it to be, so I have 2 options. I can either come back over into Build Skeleton and make some adjustments, perhaps something like that. Then when I come back over into the Animate mode, that gives me a little bit more flexibility for my starting position, and I might need to do that again, or I might just turn off keep distance and adjust using the combination. Now for the other limbs, I definitely need to have keep distance turned off. Otherwise, I'm just locked to this original range. So I just want to make sure, whichever strategy I'm using, that all the different parts of my drawing end up where I actually want them to be. So perhaps something like this. So once I have the starting position, I can actually, with keep distance on, start customizing and getting into whatever my starting pose is going to be. Perhaps something like that. Now again, if I want to start and end at the same pose, I can just add a global key, or I don't have to. If I'm not going to be looping, completely optional, I can just start adjusting just like I did before to have whatever sort of transition that I want to have. And when I play through, we can see how that's looking. Now, because I have these multiple drawings, we can see this is changing between right now. And it's a little bit too quick for the pace. I probably should have spent a little bit more time on the drawings, but I'm just going to select, just by holding shift, my range of 6 here. And I'm going to try a step of 2. That's still too fast. I might try a step of 3. See how that goes. Still a little bit too much of a blinky sort of feeling. So this is something where I might want to keep playing around with the drawings themselves, so that I have a better sort of transition. But I can continue wherever I want these drawings to change. So maybe at this point it's going to go back to 1. I can just click and then enter. And I want to do this both for the mesh level and for the connected drawing level. And maybe over here, it's going to go back to 2. I can also just press W and that will work. And I'm just going to delete these extra ones here. And so now when I want it to, the drawings are changing. And again, I don't have the best transition between my drawings. I should have spent more time just being a little bit more careful about that. But if I did have a really smooth transition, that would really add something to the animation here. And I can also add additional movement with the Animate tool, if that's something that I want to have, so that this is moving around. Maybe it's getting closer. Maybe somewhere back up. Maybe getting farther away again. Different angle. New rotation. A little bit closer. And so we can see how much more dynamic this starts to look as I start incorporating multiple types of animation together. All right, and that is really the basics. When you are finished, just render, fast render to MP4. It'll save on the desktop for you.